introduce myself. My name is Alex Young. I work for Westlands Water District. We have a piece of property up in Yolo County, and so we're measuring water usage up in that area. I actually was a part of this group probably about 5 years ago. Went to the field, was a field engineer for about 5 years, and now I'm back in our main office as an associate engineer and taking back on this project. Just trying to remember where I left off.
Great. Welcome.
And
Thanks for joining, Alex. Appreciate it.
Jay, real quick.
Yep.
My name is Aaron O'Callahan. I'm a new environmental program manager at the state board. I'm here today primarily tracking kind of communications around SB 88. I'll be the point person with respect to how that's changing between this year and next water year. And so while I'm mainly just kind of listening in, I'm hoping to be a resource in the future. So it's great to be here.
Yes, thanks, Aaron. Thanks. It's been great getting to know you a bit here, and welcome to State Board.
Thanks.
And DMEC as well. All right. Could we let's just go. I'm going to just kind of jump into our agenda today a bit. We're as usual, we've got kind of a lot of content on some of the updates. So I'm going to try to be quick in some of these areas, and but please raise your hand for questions, and we'll do our best to kind of jump in and answer those. But for the presenters, I think it'd be better probably if we can to just hold your questions to the end of their presentations, and then we can probably jump in from there to just help them proceed, unless there's a kind of an issue of clarity that we need to bring to the fore to help everybody stay on the same page. So jumping in, we're going to give you a sense of where we are in annual reporting in this transition year to Cal Waters. I think a quick summary on that is we're roughly where we were about this time last year. So in terms of reporting, we are very grateful to the efforts of CDWA and South Delta Water Agency, especially in getting us going on the Delta ACP platform for water years 23 and 24. And I think that really enabled a much smoother transition to the water year 25 reporting. We also want to think about the requirements of SB 88, as Aaron noted, in light of just thinking about the practicality of the requirements and an approach to large diversions in the Delta. And we're kind of just beginning that. We've started to have some discussions with different RDs, irrigation districts, and growers in the Delta, but just really at the beginning of that process. Pretty excited today to kind of talk about some of Carlos's work on ET variances and measuring that in Sassoon Marsh, and just having a better understanding of kind of some of the open water ET metrics. Similarly from Forest, an update on open ET developments of late, and then additionally checking in with Russ Ryan on the continuing work that Met is doing, especially at Bolden, and the status of multiple measurement experiments there, and TNC's work on tailwater diversions. Next slide, please.
1 second. Hold on. Okay.
So as I noted, we are just about where we were roughly this time last year in terms of overall reporting. We're going to be doing some pretty active outreach to try to get back to our 99% reporting level for the last 2 years. That I think the best way to address questions about reporting and water management in the Delta is to kind of be ahead of the curve, and that's really the spirit of this Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium. With that, Will, why don't I turn this over to you to kind of dig into some of the numbers a bit here?
Right. Thanks, Jay. So I'm a senior engineer in the Office of the Delta Water Master. We've been working hard to reach out to water users to help get set up in the Cal Water's reporting database. It's been a big lift to go to a new system that's set up a different way. So with that, and as Jay said, we're doing pretty well with 90% of the reports in. And between folks that are kind of already oriented in the system and just pending reports, 4% and another 4% in the Pescadero area that we already know are inactive, that we're pretty close to 98% once those come in. And we'll continue to reach out to folks that we haven't reached yet. So that's still a high priority for us. The numbers for diversion and use reports are pretty close to the last couple years, which were at about 1.4 million acre feet total annual water diversion or use. As we'll discuss, we've got a couple different methods for that. 2/3 of that through OpenET estimates through the Delta Alternative Compliance Plan, which we've now integrated into the Cal Water system to pull in some of that ET estimates from OpenET. Just over 400,000 acre feet for measured diversions. And a lot of these are larger diversions, municipal or larger irrigation districts that do have meters. And we see a little improved level of data submissions every year. So that's encouraging. Still some that aren't measured in any way that we can discern, reported to us that may just require additional outreach to clarify that. And just for comparison, threw up 4.8 million acre feet exported from major project pumps. And that's based on the CDEC pumping data because it is generally reported under a number of different rights, could be Shasta, Oroville, et cetera. So that's just for comparison in terms of Delta export. So as we talked about the last time we met in November, we do have the update of the SB 88 water measurement regulations. That was codified, finalized, part of the California Code of Regulations as of February 1st. The SB 88 regs have been in effect since 2016, and these aren't real major changes in terms of implementation of what the law is, but it does clarify specific requirements that should help us communicate and follow up with folks. So there's revised timelines with how that comes into effect since we're in the middle of the water year here. Some new requirements coming into effect as of water year 27 in October. Requirements for updating alternative compliance plans as of January of next year. And so since we do have the large major Delta ACP and other ACPs in the Delta, that we do anticipate working with folks on how to update those plans to be in conformance with the new regulation requirements, and especially for large diversions. Specific requirements for large diversions, and this is in terms of strict compliance with the regulations, before we take into consideration any alternative compliance. Based on the size of a diversion, this is either greater than 30 CFS or 10,000 acre feet per year. And that's either a right that's big, that has multiple diversions, or it could be multiple rights through one point of diversion. I've clarified that so that it is owned by one owner operator for that 30 CFS. Required measurement frequency is to measure on an hourly or more frequent basis. For most of these greater than 30 CFS, that's also going to be greater than 1,000 acre feet per year. But if it's between 200 and 1,000, it could be a daily measurement. And the third major point is the requirement of submission of data to the State Water Board. And this has been a requirement to post weekly to a website prior to the regs update, but they've really clarified that it is for these large diversions to submit them weekly, and the system for incorporating those reports is still in development. So there's the option to submit to an approved website, which may ultimately just be the Cal Water system, not fully fleshed out yet. But this is important for us because it lays out some expected diligence in terms of understanding of operations on a weekly basis, which we'll I'm sure discuss a little more. So another view of the timeline. Thanks, Aaron, for the slide. For all diverters, the need to update their measurements and kind of review the new requirements as of October 1st. And in January, we'll have some submissions for the next reporting year, and submit or update the ACP as applicable. So, and then as of the next water year, October 27, then any new large diversions could be then reported at that point. Without further ado, I think the crux of the matter for us in the Delta is the how we view the OpenET alternative compliance plans as incorporated in the Delta ACP, and it's been a huge success over the last 4 years to receive them both through the efforts of Central Delta Water Agency and South Delta Water Agency, and getting all the places of use drawn and all the folks in the system. We have really had to come to terms with some basic limitations of OpenET for reporting. The most significant, obvious one is the difference between the total consumptive use and diversions in real time. That is quantity and magnitude that could be being depleted from the Delta at any given time. And that's a real kind of missing link that some of our science can help and inform, but also in terms of diligence and record keeping, both for the water users and for us to update our records in-house. I think it goes hand in hand. The other aspect, even though we know that we do have the general understanding that OpenET is really good for the total annual consumptive use, that there's also the issue of, well, how much of that's actually from soil moisture, from effective precipitation, that's not actually diverted from the Delta. And so next major issue is really that identifying that need for diligence, describing what operations are in the weekly submittal requirement. The requirements in the regulations for alternative plans is to be, where it's practicable to meet the requirements as well as possible. So that's an important consideration about what's practicable and the need for documenting that. So this could involve, just mainly the capacity of the diversion works. So we've noticed that our records are not up to date on it. So we'll be looking to update that in terms of static information of where are the large diversions, how much could they take potentially, what do they take, at the peak season, and when are these operating? I think that's information that the board really needs to do our diligence. And so especially in drought emergencies, when in times of high scarcity, we really have the need for that information. And furthermore, just to document the usage of the rights in the Delta, we know that there are many very senior rights, riparian, pre-14 appropriative rights, other basis of right. We do know that and have traditionally recognized, how senior they are, but really do need to have the evidence to show what's being taken and used. So that's an important part of our record keeping, and to quantify what the in Delta needs are that have to be recognized by others as well. So Jay, I think you wanted to jump in at this point.
Thanks for that, Will. So I think, again, we're looking to participants in this group, as Will noted, to think about, in particular, in the macro sense, how we taking a look at Delta ACP and its intersection with Cal Waters, and truing up, the conditions there consistent with SB 88. And then additionally working with large diverters across the Delta. And we have a number of kind of pilot efforts that we've discussed across this group. And I think we're looking to develop a better methodology to align the data sets, making them more understandable, more transparent, and integrating all of the diverse work and partners across the Delta that are engaged in different model experiments, if you will, and trying to better integrate that set of those data sets to make them as understandable and useful as we can. And so I think in particular, as Will noted, we've begun outreach to a number of the larger diverters across the Delta. Those 38 entities around the Delta really comprise roughly a third of the consumptive use in the Delta. So it's a relatively small group of diverters that really do represent a very substantial part of the system from a diversion or consumptive use rationale. So we are kind of looking through different lenses at this, and measuring what makes sense in different places, and have a number of different approaches underway across the Delta that I'll touch on in a moment. And again, I think we're looking to you all, the users out there, the diverters, to propose conditions as we think about updating the ACP framework, and individual ACPs, in all likelihood for the large diverters, recognizing the uniqueness of those systems, some which have very centralized diversion, some which have as many as 50 siphon pumps serving an island. And so we want to continue to take, I think, a high level of sophistication in this, and work actively with you and your engineers to really discern the best methodology in thinking about what's practical, and helping us understand some of the statutory obligations, in particular, the maximum diversion rates, and conveyance methodologies for water, and among some of the larger diverters around the Delta. Next slide, please. So I think, consistent with some of the discussions we've had here, if you look up the Cache Slough complex, the RD 2068 will have a a SCADA system working with Solano County Water Agency to really uh, help deliver some pretty precise data in across their system that will be pretty significant breakthrough in better understanding their distribution of water across a pretty large area off of the Barker Slough diversion there. TNC will be talking, of course, about their tailwater measurement in terms of thinking of analytical approaches to use power records in helping discern actual water budget dynamics, what they're pumping off of the island. Looking forward to Russ's presentation. As we all know, Med is undertaking really a multifaceted approach, looking at soil moisture sensor data as a new addition to their portfolio, which and this year should have siphon data off of each of their pumps, ET data, as well as eddy covariance data at Met. Woods Robinson Vasquez is subject to a settlement agreement, and we're working with them on kind of truing up some of the information there with respect to their pumping practices consistent with the settlement, and looking even down further in the Delta, the southern end, really RD 2058 and Pescadero, and looking at some of the challenges that they've had in water availability and using different approaches to measure diversion when they have found that they've been kind of been unable to actually secure water necessary for irrigation practices there that had been working in prior years. So there are different approaches at each one of these places. I think what I want to underscore is that we're really interested in kind of actively listening to you all, your engineers, and thinking about what the best approach is to get us the best data in these places, and then how we better integrate this data to actually have a shared understanding of consumptive use, both in a localized way in the Delta as well as at a more macro level. So I think that kind of covers our introductory approach here. Happy to take a few questions now. I do want to make sure that we give time for the presentations and have an opportunity to dig into that. So we'll hopefully reserve more time at the end also for open questions to get into this as well. But I'm happy to take a couple questions at the top if we see hands raised here.
See raised hand from Russ.
Russ, go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I had a question, and you shown on the chart in October 2026 about the larger diverters. Are they going to have to? What is the time step on that? Daily, monthly, etc., or all the above as they move forward in measuring?
So there's, I guess, I may not be equipped to answer as precisely as you wish, but there's the existing requirement for those greater than 1,000 acre-feet per year to measure hourly. But there's the reporting requirement to report it weekly. And I heard from the Division of Water Rights today that the weekly report, which is likely to be provisional, just a kind of a more real-time basis, that it could be reported as a daily volume, not as an hourly. That's my current understanding of that. Now it's a bit in flux as we get to, there's this water year, which those requirements are already in place. And then just greater detail for water year 27 starting in October, and then potentially another, small changes in the implementation expectation in the following year. So just to put a pin in those, there could be minor details. I don't know. Maybe we can follow up with you later, or clarify that
What
better.
one of the things I'm getting at is a lot of times when you have such large quantities of data, especially in larger diversions, sometimes you'll have phases, and one phase would be a preliminary phase subject to change, the data upon QA, QC, or other measures to get it to a more, okay, this is the actual number within a certain error factor, like for example.
Understood. And that's good to point out. I think this is a work in progress. And as we've seen folks come up to speed, I think statewide, only about 20% of diversions are reporting and in compliance with all the measurement regulations. I think we're a little bit better than that in the Delta, just because of, some of our larger diversions are very savvy and on the ball with that. It's really, I think for us in our, willingness to consider alternatives, is that we're looking for some extent of diligence. And just for example, I can have an app on my phone that can tell me when every appliance in my house is on, just on the consumer basis. And so when we've got power using, large facilities using pumps, et cetera, that, the reg just is really looking for a detailed understanding of what's occurring. Now, strict compliance is looking for 85 or 90% accuracy. We understand that there's limitations, especially the dirtier the water is, with the cost of such equipment. I think we're looking for feedback on the specific nature of the systems, which is, what's going on at a particular diversion, how big's the pipe, what's the pump rated at, when's it on. I think that kind of information is going to be not quite as expensive and onerous as what the full compliance might be, but I think that we're looking to update our records and get some better information on systems and who's the point of contact and how is it operated, and B, to have the discussion of, well, if we're in a kind of a provisional work in progress, ACP time extension situation, that we really need to have our homework in place for what's going on.
Thanks,
you for the
Will.
question.
Yeah, good question, Russ. And I think, Russ, we're looking at how we've talked a bit across this group, you individually, but how do we make these data sets not just a series of one-off experiments, but rather how do we look at the data in a way that can help integrate it? Looking forward to Forrest's presentation today on some of the tools that OpenET is integrating to think about kind of how we would respond in periods of a sustained heat wave, and what the implications for that would be on consumptive use in kind of a forecasted model. And so, I think there's just a lot of things that we're hoping to bring together in thinking about all this. And again, have appreciated the efforts of Metropolitan to do this portfolio of experiments that you're supervising, and those in other places across the Delta as well. But how we actually kind of make that data as comparable and useful as we can to understand, both the localized consumptive use effects and analysis and projected use and diversion analogs to that, in just helping us think about how we protect other water quality goals in the Delta, for example. So anyway, I appreciate that question, Russ. I think we we're looking to really have a better, I think, science integration on our end to pull together some of this work. So look forward to the ability to, kind of utilize data sets that are, really are going to be kind of unprecedented in this immediate water year, and putting all that data together and integrating in a way that we're all sharing it more openly and can ask, you know, deeper questions about it. So,
Thank you.
great. All right. Will, do you want to introduce Carlos a bit here? And you're, uh,
Well, let's see. I may not be the best equipped to give a full uh, optimal introduction, but please, Carlos, go ahead if you have your presentation teed up and explain your background. And we're very eager to hear some of your results and work going on here. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, let's see. Can you see the slides, everybody?
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right, so my name is Carlos Juan, and I think through the brief introduction, I'm a postdoc from UC Berkeley, and right now my work has been focusing on wetland evapotranspiration. Previously, my work has been, on atmospheric physics and different dynamics between the land and atmosphere, predominantly focusing on the energy and water and carbon cycles as a whole. So I'll just kind of get started here. First, I just want to say it's quite an honor to be here today and talk about my research and applications. To be frank, call it a lack of awareness. I was not aware of the existence of this important group until earlier this year. And so naturally, I did some diggings, and I'm quite excited for the discussion and potential collaboration that can stem from this presentation. And so, life on Earth descends from water, and our civilizations thrived from innovative water management. And I probably don't need to over-explain why water is important for this group, but I'd like to touch base on three pillars on the interconnected nature of water to show what we are up against. So the first pillar I see is the effect from natural disasters, such as drought and climate change. So in the past, we have used long-term eddy covariance data and showed how water scarcity led to reduction in crop evapotranspiration, carbon sequestration rates, and yield on the Bowden Island alfalfa. And the second pillar I see is that agricultural fields themselves are very interesting because they're essentially human-engineered landscapes. So any differences in on-farm management can lead to differences in, for example, temperature regimes, creating a unique gradients of different high temperature to low temperature. And what's important about this is that the higher temperature here in this case from the upwind fields can then get carried by wind into the downwind evaporating field, and this can increase water needs. And now the last pillar I see is also nature-based solutions, which can be an odd one. So here, my current work shows that in order to remove more carbon from the atmosphere, we are also consuming a lot of water for wetlands. And so in the unique problems we're facing nowadays, balancing climate adaptation with sustainable water management and innovative technology remains relevant. And so one of the big missing pieces is the amount of water loss, which is known as evaporation or evapotranspiration, ET. And knowing the magnitude of ET is crucial for water management. And so today, I guess, was the goal to introduce the cost-effective ET sensor. In the following, I'll first introduce different methods for measuring ET from a biometeorology standpoint. And then we'll talk about the variance volume ratio method and where it fits in for water management. So to measure ET, there are different in situ options, but each of these methods often has different constraints from financial costs to theoretical assumptions. For example, eddy covariance as the gold standard measurement is very expensive, but has a very high accuracy, while the cheaper volume ratio energy balance approach requires high precision to resolve small vertical scalar gradients, such as temperature and specific humidity. Now, surface renewal is cheaper, but often requires calibration. And additionally, it's fine where thermocouples are prone to breakage, adding additional financial costs through sensor replacement. So in essence, we need something that has adequate accuracy, affordable, durable, and easy to use, kind of somewhere in the middle of this kind of a triangle. And this is where the variance bone ratio methods, or VBR, comes in. So inspired by the bone ratio, the VBR method was invented was that the turbulent fluxes can be expressed with variances of the correlating quantities. And I promise this will be the only slide that has math. And so under the assumption of equal diffusion of heat and water transport, essentially, these two terms equal to each other, we can then obtain something called a variance bone ratio by simply sampling the standard deviation between temperature and specific humidity. And then ET is calculated with the bone ratio energy balance equation. And the sensor package itself is pretty straightforward, which includes available energy sensors like net radiometers and ground heat flux plates, and a temperature and relative humidity probe. And this setup offers benefits ranging from reductions in financial, analytical, and labor costs. And it's also worth mentioning that since weather stations typically have temperature and relative humidity measurements already, VBR can possibly be implemented expensively across these existing observations. And we have made our processing code open source online as well. And so for now, we have assessed its accuracy over a year across 3 wetlands in California. One is in the Suisun City, Hillslough Marsh, and then one is in, I think, Oakley, Gilbert Tract, and one is on Twitchell Island, East End wetland. So all these wetlands have different surface and hydrological conditions. And specifically, we have one non-tidal site with accumulated dead biomass with East End, and then one site with a mix of vegetation and open channel, Dutch Slough, and then another completely open water tidal site, Hillslough. And so this work is also accepted and will soon be published in Water Resources Research, so keep an eye out. Okay, so across these sites, annual total ET from variance bone ratio tracked surprisingly close with eddy covariance on the order of within, I think, 2 to 10%. And agreement was the strongest across sites B and C, the 2 tidal sites, where both daily and monthly error metrics, such as RMSE, remained low. However, at the non-tidal site A, was the accumulated dead biomass, the RMSE value was higher, but VBR was still provided comparable results against eddy covariance. And so earlier this week, since we've been adding VBR to our agricultural sites, and then so I kind of spent the week kind of looking at some quick data. And so here are just some quick look at the seasonal totals. And because these 2 fields on the Bolden Island went through some replanting or I call it renovation, these are some just quick results I selected throughout the years when alfalfa, sorghum, winter wheat, and corn was kind of in its full bloom. And as we can see, to be honest, the total ET from VBR was not spot on all the time, but close enough with lower daily error metrics from mean bias error, mean absolute error, and root mean square errors. And the question I guess I have for all of you is also to understand the definition of good, because how good is good enough, and what are your criteria? Do you need daily data? Do you need weekly data? Do you need monthly data? And what are some of the purposes? Right. So in science, we ask different questions, and then there are different tools for us to better address a specific question. And then so this is one of the open question I have for all the audiences here. But anyways, going back to VBR, from these testings, we saw a few limitations that's pretty clear. First is the obvious one with mathematical derivation that the standard deviation approach can't detect negative values. So in this case, if there are any negative bone ratio values, the VBR will assume to be positive. And the second is VBR underperforms in advective conditions, and these conditions are especially pronounced in agricultural regions. And then so we're still figuring out a way to deal with this. And lastly, the VBR method, by its calculation here, if you look at the numerator, Its sensitivity to the accuracy, it's very sensitive to the accuracy of the net available energy measurements, which can also be challenging to measure in the field due to intrafield variability, as we can see here in the Bolden alfalfa site, or the accumulation of the dead biomass, or even just a large open water. The amount of heat storage is really hard to account for. But these are some of the parts that we know. At the same time, results from VBR were quite comparable with eddy covariance while being cheaper and having a much simpler data processing. And these together satisfy, two parts of these triangles by having the accuracy, adequate accuracy, simplicity, and affordability. And now to answer the remaining question on using this sensor operationally, one priority is to test VBR across ecological and climatic gradients. And this is where the variance-Bowen ratio-based terrestrial evapotranspiration flux vortex network comes in. So the concept of vortex is very similar to telemetry, which we use daily, for example, to get a sense of how bad is the traffic at MacArthur Maze, or would the weather be nice enough for Carlos to skip work partially and go for a bike ride. Right, and these are not always accurate, but useful information. And so the next part, the next leg of my research is focusing on, can we do the same thing for ET data? And what we envision to happen here with Vortex is that these dense observations would provide pixel-like ET that can be used alongside of those first-rate cutting-edge models, such as those from OpenET, and provide near real-time information of ET everywhere all the time. And currently, we're assessing VBR's accuracy in agriculture, forest, wetland, and urban environments across climatic gradients. And then so we're still kind of digesting a lot of the data, and then hopefully soon I can share with you all some of the results we are seeing. And just kind of to break down, zone out into the bigger picture, to enable this vision, there are several goals we're pursuing with the short-term goals on expanding the accuracy assessment of VBR and developing a turnkey sensor system in-house. And in the long run, we'll pilot a dense deployment to test out, what deployment density can this enable downstream applications for fancy things like bias correction, downscaling, or other applications that might be suitable with not just, ET forecasting, but also climate modeling. So with that, I just want to kind of stop here and then just, have more time for discussions. Here are some links. If you're interested in our lab, there's the link and then my publications. And then Dennis is my advisor. Dennis and I recently did a blog post for the California Water Blog about, measuring and modeling evaporation across California. So please feel free to check it out. And I'm going to stop here. Happy to take any questions.
Great. Thanks for that, Carlos. It's really interesting to look at your work across both, natural wetland environments as well as agricultural ET and variations therein. I'm curious, and maybe just to start in a general sense on a question here is in looking at your locations in the Delta and the ET values that you're seeing and our interest in really kind of, again, putting together information that really helps us discern with greater accuracy, better localized water budgets, as well as, a Delta-wide understanding of closer to real-time ET. If you have suggestions or experiments in the pipeline that you think we need to think about in better understanding this picture holistically, which I think we've given you some sense of in our prior discussions that have been more narrowly topic centered, I guess. But just curious your thinking about kinds of explorations that you suggest that we identify in thinking about data gaps that we need to better understand in thinking about ET values and where it's most informative and how we can help get to closer real-time understanding in application of the ET data.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Jay. That's a really good question. As a I'll say like a hard question to answer, so I will try my best. I think, from working with wetlands, it kind of, humbles me a lot in terms of, all these wetlands are seemingly very similar. I'm measuring ET in an open water system with vegetation, but each site has its own site-specific conditions that kind of make ET very complex. And so I've been kind of thinking about in terms of in order to provide near real-time ET, what should we do? I mean, the first thing I have in mind is kind of start deploying more sensors, ground-based sensors. We can have some super sites. We have, I think 5 other available eddy covariance sites in the Delta from our biomat lab. And then alongside of these sites, we can also have different satellite sites just to collect good enough of data. And then in terms of kind of feeding into the mainstream for providing, a first estimation of, how ET is behaving across different parts. Recently, Twitchell Island got burned, or like this wetland got burned, and then I think DWR is interested in kind of adopting BBR into measuring ET from the ground because it is affordable, right? And then so yeah, I guess like the first step is kind of setting up these sensors everywhere, when it's applicable. And right now I'm kind of exploring with these sensors how to assess with remote sensing ET models. And then so we kind of started some first principle testings just for sites in our lab that has BBR with eddy covariance, and then with OpenET kind of estimates, we're kind of generating some monthly outputs, and then to see how can we use these kind of in situ sensors to bias correct to assess remote sensing models. And to be honest, at the end of the day, every sensor has its own pitfalls. I mean, eddy covariance is not accurate 100% of the time. So we're still in the zone of like which one is right. And then I think that's why I asked the question in terms of the definition, in terms of, how good is good enough. Because for me, working in a research field, I would say it's like in an ivory tower or somewhere that like I need to step out and I need to understand what do you need in order to kind of pivot my research better to kind of accommodate that. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that.
No.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Carlos. Russ,
Yeah,
you want to
Russ.
jump in there? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was pausing. I didn't want to step on others that want to ask questions. I really appreciate this presentation because it does support what we're doing out here on Bolden. I mean, as you know, we've been measuring. Carlos, we've been measuring out here for a number of years. But there's also other potential cross-breeding benefits, meaning that we have a station here. I call it eddy covariant plus plus because we have other instrumentations hanging on it to measure precipitation during the season or to measure soil moisture content at various places. And it applies to when we compare the field, if it's a cornfield or if it's a sorghum field, or it could be, other type alfalfa, for example, that you can take that and compare that to your open ET because you know your acreage. So you measure and you take the measurement from the station. That's, I think, where you can get some cross correlation. Now, the cross pollination is a carbon flux that you're measuring, that you have a baseline. You set a baseline. So if you do any type of transition, we do that over in WebTrack, where we haven't instituted or constructed the wetlands part of that project yet. That'll be in the summertime, but initially we get and that's important because then you understand what your net benefit is, and that translates to an economy as you apply it to the amount of credits that you can get through the various credit agencies for the different efforts. But my question is, what are you seeing field to field relationships from the data from the eddy covariance station to, say, like, for example, OpenET? I think you may have that already there.
Yeah, thank you, Russ. Because here, I haven't looked into the OpenET data very carefully, so I'm just comparing the variance bound ratio with eddy covariance data. Uh, and then so I think for variability wise, I mean, just looking at OpenET, I think for some of the parts it makes sense, if OpenET is overestimating. For example, if we look at, let me find this one. For example, if we look at this site that has advection, advection is the horizontal movement. It is really hard for us to capture with remote sensing. And in a way, I think OpenET is doing the right job in terms of capturing ET. And so for the next part is for scientific kind of a breakthrough to account for these lateral transport of different heat, moisture, or even carbon. Right. And when we go back into, the point in terms of linking energy, water, and carbon fluxes, I think that's quite important for us to understand everything in a holistic sense, because it's not just about water, right? If we go to this piece of work we did with the alfalfa on Boden Island, is that, we're, essentially building the agricultural economy for Saudi Arabia or China in terms of, growing these crops for cattle feeds outside. And California doesn't have a lot of water. So we're using precious water resources, and then, these can quantify or qualify as climate solutions. But, at the same time, if we're hitting drought years, it gets mitigated. And then we have to understand, the life cycle of a crop, even the fate of ET. Where does ET go? Does it increase precipitation in the Sierra Nevada? And then for crops, does the economic input kind of outvalues the climate benefits? And I think that's a really interesting thing and hard to grasp my mind around. Sorry, I think I went a little bit off tangent. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
does. It means it means more work is what it means.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
It-
That's why I
it-
have a postdoc.
yeah, it's funny because the more you get into a certain parameter, the more you realize, oh my goodness, I don't know this, I don't know that, and I don't know this.
Right.
So it creates the paradigm where you have to account for other things or make certain assumptions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then like just one last thing maybe to add on as I'm looking into wetlands, a lot of the time we think about, ET is very important during the day. And so here in this study, we're also kind of doing some salami slicing. So maybe I can publish more papers, doing some salami slicings, and then kind of we look into nighttime evaporation that's going on in these wetlands, and they're not negligible. And then so it kind of opens up different paradigms, like you said, in terms of, hey, these are some of the things we previously thought should be assumed negligible, but given climate change, giving, the depletion of natural resources, we're facing new problems that requires us to think about the problem sets differently with the tools we have.
Thank you, Carlos. That was a great
Yeah,
presentation. Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, Chris.
Hi, Carlos. Yeah, thanks
Hi.
for a great presentation. I was wondering,
Yeah.
have you looked at similar estimates for rice? Rice is often promoted in the Delta as a way of
Hmm.
halting subsidence. So it'll
Yeah.
be interesting to look at consumption rates versus applied rates for
Hmm.
seasonally,
Right.
monthly, annually.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
not yet because we don't have any rice sites currently, and then so
Mm,
we're waiting for DWR because I think DWR bought the Twitchell Island or part of the Twitchell Island.
hmm.
They are
Okay, cool.
converting I think the some of the fields into rice paddies or wetlands, and then
Hmm.
so we're hoping like maybe we can set up some sites. But within the Vortex team, Ben Runkle from University of Arkansas, he has
Mm,
a lot of rice paddies, so we can look into rice paddies as well. Yeah. So we're
cool.
trying to see maybe like as an advertisement, we're still kind of expanding the network. And if you have a specific crop type that's very interesting, like rice that we don't have data on, perhaps we can add the VPR on your existing network as well.
Sweet. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks.
Carlos, I will add
Yeah.
that I'm not sure if you're aware of this, is that
Hmm.
over on Holland Track, we're now entering our second rice season. So if
Uh-huh.
there's any data, and I think we had an eddy covariance station over before
Uh-huh.
they planted. So maybe we can grab that data, and that might be useful to take a look at as a
Right.
beginning point.
For sure. Yeah. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, someone mentioned Staten Island Nature Conservancy has rice.
Mm-hmm.
DWR also has Sherman Island and try and plant rice
Okay.
there too. Yeah, those are great places.
Okay.
Yeah, that's cool. You guys have thought about it and
Yeah.
hopefully working with Metropolitan and Russ, get that
Right.
going. Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. Should I stop sharing?
Let's see. I don't think I'm seeing other
Oh,
questions for Carlos at this point. Is that correct? Great.
yeah.
All
If
right.
you have additional comments, questions, feel free to email me. Happy to chat more. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that, Carlos. Yeah, really great presentation. Thanks. I think it also tees up some of the innovations that OpenET folks are working on here too. And so I think gives us a good opportunity to turn to Forrest to get an update on some of the programs that OpenET is undertaking out in the field as well. Let's see.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Jay. And thank you, Carlos, for the update. And Jay, before we jump in, two quick things. I appreciate the honorary doctorate, but I should note I have a bachelor's and master's degree from Stanford University. After doing that, I helped Cal State Monterey Bay stand up a program modeled after Stanford's, and then worked with some friends in the software industry before going to NASA, thinking I'd be there for a year or two before going back to graduate school. And it's been one interesting problem to work on after another. Meanwhile, Carlos was working in our lab at about the time OpenET got started, and he has wisely gone ahead and finished his his PhD and is nearly done with a postdoc. In the time it took me to get OpenET to the point where we could produce data at national scales. Also wanted to clarify, I'm a senior scientist at NASA Ames Research Center. Of course, I collaborate closely with the OpenET nonprofit, but have no formal affiliation. I do serve as the NASA project scientist for the OpenET consortium.
Right.
And so what I was planning to talk about today in response to your request, the request from Will, was to talk a little bit about where we are with data latency, progress on forecasting ET, and then also thoughts on next steps for the effective precipitation and calculation of ET specifically from irrigation, as well as contributions to seepage where it may occur. And I should highlight that the OpenET is a community-driven, consortium-based effort that, of course, includes all of the active partners and modeling teams, but it was also stood up to provide a mechanism to help coordinate scientific advances like Carlos's work and provide a way to more quickly apply that advances in science and improvements in both ground and satellite-based measurement techniques for evapotranspiration, and turn those advances into tools that could provide value for water resource managers and agricultural producers, folks dealing with wildland fire, and others much more quickly than we've been able to do in the past. One thing I wanted to highlight for folks, not critical for the Delta, but OpenET in December did release the next collection, OpenET Collection 2.1. So that does expand our geographic coverage to CONUS. Some of the issues in the Delta parallel technical challenges in the southeastern U.S. and in the Mississippi Delta. So there are some nice overlaps there. I wanted to highlight that advance for folks. And then I also wanted to flag that, of course, a lot of the ways in the DMEC that we interact with OpenET is specifically through the ACP interfaces and tools. Those are retrieving data from the OpenET API. And because it's being used to report annual water use, we're not using the provisional data. We're waiting to ensure we have the final climate and meteorological inputs, any updates to the Landsat archive from USGS before we compute that retrospective annual ET. So we're working with our final or archival data set for OpenET. We also have a low latency provisional data set that's produced for Landsat 9 within typically 24 to 72 hours of satellite overpass, and for Landsat 8 That's typically 3 to 7 days, sometimes up to a week or two, but typically 3 to 7 days after satellite overpass. In addition to the API, we also have the Data Explorer so that anyone who's part of the DMEC or any farmer, rancher, any member of the public can go and quickly, with a few clicks of a mouse, get access to the latest data from OpenET. The data is available in the Google Earth Engine public data catalog. And then we also recently released the Farm and Ranch Management Support user interface. That's farms.etdata.org. So folks can get recurring reports for any location in the US. It was designed around requirements from our farming and ranching partners, but it works fine for wetlands. You can get data for burn scars, grasslands, any area that might be of interest. So just wanted to flag those other mechanisms for retrieving data from OpenET. I wanted to turn to latency, and I figured it easier to show people than tell people. You can go to explore.etdata.org. If you toggle on raster view, you should be able to see the latest monthly data. You can click anywhere there in the Delta and see. Currently, we have data through February 2026. For the monthly data is typically updated from our provisional collection with a roughly 2-week latency. We want to be sure we have the last scene from the end of the month, or the next scene from the beginning of the next month that's cloud-free and high quality before we produce the monthly data. That typically takes about 2 weeks from the end of the month to make that available. On Monday, we'll be updating the Data Explorer with the 2026, all of the 2026 daily data as well. So you can click on the daily tab and see the latest data for the Delta or any other location in the US there. You can also use the Farm and Ranch Management Support interface. That's available at farms.etdata.org. When you log in, the very first thing you'll want to do is up at the top, use the Add New Boundaries. You can draw your own. You can select from the existing field boundaries in California, which are generally very good. Although you can see in this example, there's probably 3 different individual fields within this polygon that are being irrigated separately. So that's a case where you may want to go in and draw your own, or you can upload a shapefile if you have a ranch map or any other shapefile or GeoJSON describing an area of interest. Once those shapes are saved, you can go ahead and create a report. Here's an example from Bolton Island. You might want to select the daily interval. You can make that recurring if you want to get updates, set a start date and end date, add the models or variables you're interested in. That'll run the report. Typically takes between 1 and 5 minutes. Once you have those fields, you can then click on them and it'll plot the latest data. Currently, this is set to be a little bit more conservative and just go up to the last clear sky satellite retrieval. For these fields, you can see data is available through March 11th. And then through the API, which also has a point and click interface, that's available there at openet-api.org, especially for those raster time series. So you can retrieve data for a point, a polygon, or use a shapefile to get a multi-polygon retrieval. Once you upload and define those areas, you hit go, and it'll go ahead and return data for you. It's a CSV or a JSON or even as a stack of rasters. You can see through that interface, the latest data here for the Delta is through March 23rd. So just wanted to show a couple of different ways to that anyone on this call can interact with the OpenET data and verify the latency there. So currently, again, we're for Landsat 9 about 1 to 3 days, and for Landsat 8, anywhere between a day under the best case up to about a week, 7 to 8, sometimes 9 days. So wanted to flag that. Moving forward, we certainly expect to be able to deliver monthly or daily data with those same latencies. So for applications in the Delta that might require low latency data on impacts of high periods when there's high atmospheric demand for water, flash drought, heat waves, high temperature spikes, we can certainly deliver daily data to the Delta Water Master's office and to the State Water Resources Control Board to provide near real-time quantification of rapid increases in consumptive use, and happy to do that. So just wanted to take a minute and highlight our current latency. Looking towards the future, another thing we're working on is the ability to deliver short-term forecasts of ET and reference ET. We have a study ongoing. Robin Fishman and AJ Purdy at Cal State Monterey Bay have been doing this work, looking at, well, the broader study is to look at different techniques for forecasting ET and different ways of projecting both what's happening to the vegetation as well as what's happening to the atmospheric demand to quantify ET. Currently at a 7-day lead time. There are some additional longer lead forecasts where we could go out to a month. We do anticipate that the accuracy of the weather forecast is really going to degrade beyond about a week. So currently we're focusing on that 7-day forecasting period, looking at reference ET, the fraction of reference ET to measure what's happening in the agricultural field and what's happening to the crop, both in terms of growth stage and any water limitations, and then the overall ET forecast. Just wanted to show kind of some example comparisons to illustrate where we're at. This is a field that's at the 25th percentile of mean absolute error for reference ET. The reference ET is coming from the National Weather Service forecasted reference ET data set that's driven by the National Digital Forecast data set. And so this is comparing the 7-day forecasted ET to what we got from GridMet, the observed gridded bias-corrected reference ET. Overall tracking well, but there's certainly going to be periods where the reference ET is missing. It can miss a spike in temperature, a spike in wind speed, other things that will drive sudden increases in ET. But overall, it does a pretty good job of capturing the patterns, but certainly not perfect. Another example from the 75th percentile. This is of the distribution of mean absolute error and showing a persistent bias. So overall capturing patterns, but there certainly can be periods of larger error and conditions that will lead to sustained biases and offsets between the forecasted reference ET and the observed. So important to understand what the inherent errors are and expected uncertainty is in just forecasting the reference ET as a measure of atmospheric demand. We have tried probably about 20 different approaches for forecasting the fraction of reference ET to capture what's happening to the vegetation, the crop. So far, keep it simple has worked best, and simply carrying the last observed fraction of reference ET forward until we get the next satellite observation has outperformed every machine learning technique we can throw at it. That continues to give us the best performance. This is an example, again, looking at the 25th percentile from the full distribution of mean absolute error for an almond field. Overall, tracking fine and actually doing better than the climatology, which surprised me when we looked at a comparison of the accuracies, and then an example for a double crop corn and soybean rotation at the 75th percentile of mean absolute error, just showing a bit more error contributed by lags between the satellite observations and the change in crop canopy conditions. So, but overall able to capture the phenology and capture the main signals and changes as a result of irrigation events, the crop canopy development, and senescence. And then looking at this overall, looking at the contribution of error from the satellite data, when we are forecasting within 8 days of the last satellite overpass, nearly the full distribution of error is below the plus or minus 20% of mean absolute error. So, and the mean there is, our median is about a 7 or 8%. Once we get out to 8 to 15 days since the last satellite overpass, that error range begins to expand. And once we're more than about 2 weeks out, I think the error becomes too high. But we see good evidence that those 7-day forecasts should stay within that plus or minus 20% range consistently. The third thing I wanted to talk about was so I think at the last DMEC, Connor Doherty presented on Otter. So we walked through the OpenET tool for tracking effective precipitation. And the progress we've made in being able to calculate effective precipitation. That's the amount of rainfall that falls and remains in the field and within the root zone where it's available to contribute to evapotranspiration. We're close to finalizing that system. The comparisons with previously developed tools have been really favorable, and comparisons against meter data sets from California and Utah, Kansas, and Oregon have all been very, very encouraging. So what's next? When we look at the Delta in particular, I think one of the strengths of the satellite data is that 30-meter spatial resolution. And while we continue to rely on data sets from eddy covariance, while there's a lot of promise in the tools that Carlos is developing, one limitation of all of those ground-based measurements is they reduce all of the spatial variability to a single point. And the strength of the satellite data is it gives us that 30-meter spatial resolution where we can capture the gradients in ET across a field that are occurring because of variability in soil type and texture, variability in distribution uniformity of irrigation, variability in the delta elevation, as well as, of course, the crops grown. So with Otter, what we can do is compute the expected ET of applied water at that 30-meter spatial scale to capture the gradients. And we can do that not just at annual time scales, so you can see those spatial gradients in the annual time scales, but also month by month. And so here's an example time series just for June through September of 2025. This is the northwest portion of Bolden Island. And our hypothesis is that if we use OpenET with Otter to compute the ET of applied water, there's the potential to identify areas where seepage may be a meaningful contribution to the water supply for evapotranspiration from the crop. So we're running Otter at that 30-meter resolution for Bolden Islands and I think some of the other islands in the Delta to compute the effective precipitation and the ET of applied water at that roughly quarter-acre spatial scale. Next, we can compare the ET of applied water against information on total water diversions as a measure of the total irrigation and identify areas where the total ET of applied water is greater than the total volume of diversions over any given period. That would help us recommend additional target locations where you could deploy soil moisture sensors or other instrumentation to verify that seepage may be contributing to elevated soil moisture throughout the growing season. So that I think that's where we're headed as a way to try to help resolve the discrepancies between total amount of water diverted, the computed ET that would be expected from applied water for irrigation, as well as any contributions from seepage and sub-irrigation. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on, Jay, here just at the end is where we are in terms of preparing for the next OpenET collection and advances in the overall OpenET ensemble of models. First, the team is working on improving the meteorological inputs to the satellite-driven models. We are assessing two different alternatives to GridMet to improve not only the spatial resolution, but also the accuracy of some of the key meteorological inputs to the models, especially the wind fields. That's an area where the inputs to GridMet, we think, are a bit too coarse, and some of the additional data sets developed from the RTMA system, we think are going to result in improved accuracy and spatial resolution of some of these key meteorological inputs to the models. Second, we're working on addition of more satellites, additional satellite inputs to the models, focusing on ecostress, which has just a land surface temperature measurement, Sentinel-2, which currently only has the multispectral measurements, no land surface temperature, and then also some work that is combining the coarser scale 375 meter VIIRS land surface temperature with the Sentinel-2 to produce a daily downscaled product. So we're working on evaluating all of those inputs to see if we can effectively and consistently reduce the time between clear sky satellite overpass dates from Landsat. The third thing we're doing is there have been some pretty impressive advances in development of additional approaches for quantifying ET using satellite data. currently reviewing some of the recently published advances and some models that have been proposed for addition to the OpenET ensemble. And then the last thing we're looking at is the integration of the data from the recently launched NISAR mission, the NASA Indian Space Research Organization Synthetic Aperture Radar mission, which quantifies soil moisture at spatial resolutions of up to 200 meters. That's potentially really valuable input into the soil water balance model that can help us capture soil evaporation during extended periods between satellite observations. So I think that's another early stage but potentially important innovation. At the end of the day, all of these changes and advances have to result in quantifiable and reproducible improvements in the accuracy of the OpenET data. We are not going to make changes just because it seems like a good idea scientifically. Any updates or changes to the OpenET modeling framework and the ensemble of models has to result in, again, quantifiable, verifiable improvements in the accuracy of the data. And I'll stop there and see if there are any questions or anything else you wanted me to touch upon.
That was great for us. I mean, I just really appreciate each time that you really bring this to our attention. You've spent a good amount of time thinking about the particular challenges we face in the Delta. So thanks for your work on this. A really good presentation.
Yeah, happy to. Any questions? Will? Yeah.
Of course, I have one. Yes, thank you so much. I mean, I'm constantly blown away by the amount of detail and potential utility here. I am curious though specifically about kind of the status of Otter as a development program, and just do we have any updates on kind of release documentation?
Yeah, Connor's goal is to finish the manuscript and have that submitted originally by the end of the month. I think we'll be close to that. So that's our next step, is to get that submitted for peer review. And then the other thing we are working on is engaging with our agricultural partners, just to be sure that the way we deploy that is seen as a consistent win for all of our agricultural partners, recognizing that information on ET of applied water at field scales can be sensitive. So we recognize and want to be sure that we've taken the time to work through those concerns before deploying that broadly. Certainly have that available now as a resource for applications like the Delta ACP, as well as some of the incentive-based water conservation programs in the Colorado River Basin. So I think we have enough confidence in it to begin using it operationally, but we want to be sure we fully address data privacy concerns before putting out national maps of ET of applied water or anything like that.
Terrific. And I guess just as a brief follow-up, what's the best way to install soil moisture sensors or otherwise, compare in situ kind of soil balance results?
Sure. I mean, ideally, we want to use a sensor design that's going to cover the full profile, right? So whether that's something like a soil view or multiple, individual probes are deployed across a vertical, vertical depth profile would work. And then ideally, I think we'd want a gradient across elevation or across gradient and soil type or texture. So I would think we'd want to conduct transects from areas from potentially high ET to low ET, areas with good agreement with information on total volume of applied water and large disagreement. But at minimum, we'd want to cover the full root zone for the crop, and I think at least have 2 or 3 measurement points along a gradient.
Wow, terrific. So I look forward to more discussion on that. I see there's a couple questions. One is in the chat from Joe Fackrell. Would the seepage estimates take return flows into account? Maybe Joe, you can pop up if you want to clarify that.
Yeah, I'll say I'm not at the point where I would claim that we're going to be able to quantify total seepage volume. What I think we can do is identify places where there are larger differences between the total volume of applied water or diverted water and the expected ET of applied water. So where ET of applied water is much greater than the total volume diverted, there's two possibilities. The ET data is completely wrong, or there is a contribution to evapotranspiration and root zone soil moisture from seepage. And so a really easy way, I think, to verify that is to deploy soil moisture sensors to confirm that even when no water is applied, there's meaningful amounts of soil moisture in the root zone, right? If there's no water being diverted during the summer and you still have high ET, something has to be driving that. So I think if we can verify the accuracies of OpenET and show that they're consistent with the national studies, then I think we could start to look at using OpenET data to quantify the net contribution of seepage to consumptive use in the Delta. But that is a hypothesis at this point.
Okay.
Can I
Yeah,
add to,
that makes
can I
sense.
add to that? Can I add to that? This is Russ. So for us, one of the things that we look at, because we obviously you deploy your moisture probe at a certain location.
Yeah.
Now, if that location, and I'm looking at one right now on Bolden, is close to our major irrigation ditch that brings water onto the water, you've got your hydrodynamic gradient transference under that might inform that there's a greater contribution to seepage versus out in the middle of a 40-acre field where you have different soil structure, meaning it could be a variation between clay layers, peat soil, or mineral soils, which will have a different transverticity and transfer of your gradient underneath from seepage.
Yeah, again, that's why I would suggest deploying sensors along a transect and in a transect along those types of gradients. And I think what we could do is I try to identify locations where there are these large discrepancies where additional soil moisture measurements would help us start to answer that question. And if there's no water diverted and there's high ET, but soil moisture is getting close to maximum allowable depletion, that tells us the ET data is wrong. If we say there's high ET and no diversions and there's a full crop or a lot of wetland vegetation and soil moisture is close to field capacity, that tells us that the ET data is probably right and there is a contribution from seepage. I'm not sure who's next, Shay or George. Shay, and then we'll go to George.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Forrest. Just curious about two things. One, how is OpenET estimating ET of applied water? And two, I mean, is that something that you plan to make available in the platform?
Yes, so ET is, as Connor talked about at the last meeting, OpenET is computing ET of applied water as the total ET, total computed actual ET from the OpenET ensemble, minus effective precipitation computed with Otter. And happy to share the white paper with Otter or talk, or provide the review of Connor's presentation separately or share his slides with you. So we're computing it as the ET from OpenET minus effective precipitation from Otter. Okay. And so that's going to include ET of applied water plus any sub-irrigation, access to shallow groundwater, or any other sources of moisture.
Got it. Yeah, if you don't mind sharing that white paper, I don't know if I was there at the last meeting, or at least I don't remember seeing it. So
if you wouldn't mind dropping your email in the chat. I'll send that to you.
Okay, thanks, Forrest.
And George?
Well, hi, thanks for a very interesting presentation. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am that there's another Stanford graduate on this call.
Go Cardinal.
Hey, go trees. So I'm just a country lawyer. My family started farming in the Delta in 1906. I'm very familiar with McDonald Island and other islands, but I think maybe some on the ground real world stuff might help you, particularly with the cause and effect relationship between seepage and evapotranspiration.
Yeah.
On McDonald Island, the surface of which is 20 feet below sea level,
Right.
seepage is our biggest problem.
Sure.
We spent $1 million on electricity last year to keep the island from flooding because of seepage.
Right.
And so I don't know that there actually is a cause and effect relationship between how much seepage we have and how much evapotranspiration we have. I think that's an interesting question because we probably divert 4 acre feet of water to irrigate crops.
Yeah.
But our engineers calculated that on a rough basis, we return 6 to 7 acre feet through our
Right.
drainage pumps back to the system.
Right.
So if cause and effect is that having more water than you need causes additional evapotranspiration,
No.
maybe, I don't know.
No, I think what OpenET could tell you is what should work out is if you look at precipitation plus seepage minus what you're pumping back, that should balance, right? In
Right.
theory. That should
In
balance.
theory.
Now, if you're diverting 4 and returning 7, and you have something like 3, roughly 36 inches of ET, is that doesn't work out, right? Plus, if we account for some precipitation, so it'd be good to sit down and actually get the actual numbers and the actual data, and then work out the water balance. So I think the thing that OpenET can help you with is of the total amount that's seeping, how much is being consumed through evapotranspiration. If you look at seepage plus any water diverted, at least we can take off the evapotranspiration, and what's left should be what you have to pump back as return flows.
I think that makes sense. But there's also a big conversion going on in the Delta now from crops like potatoes, which aren't doing well, to rice.
Sure.
And so I think that'll have an effect. But I'd be happy to hook you up directly with our engineer who did the calculations. And, any way we could reduce our pumping costs to deal, with excess water that we don't want. But it's not just seepage. There's underground springs and there's rainfall, right? So that's our biggest problem in the deep delta. And we can't change it. If somebody would come along and stop the seepage, that would be great because that would save us a ton of money.
Yeah, understood. Right. Completely understand that challenge. We're not going to solve that problem with satellites, obviously.
No.
But I hope we could help to close the water balance for some of these islands, or at least identify areas where additional measurements would help explain differences between diversions, any return flows, and consumptive use.
Okay, my last thought, and I appreciate that, is I think crops versus weeds will evapotranspirate a pretty known amount of water, right? I mean, almond trees use a pretty well-established metric. So do other kinds of crops. And so that's where I have a problem with the cause and effect relationship.
The interesting thing, though, is if you think about this current year, as I see in the comments in March, when you have summer in March, like ET is much higher this month than probably it's been in the last 10 or 15 years. And so using static values or static crop coefficients isn't going to capture that.
Right.
And so being able to account for the interannual variability in meteorological conditions, being able to account for there's 80,000 farms in California. There's probably 50,000 different, permutations of production practices.
Sure.
So I think being able to count for all of the differences in irrigation system type, timing of irrigation, planting dates, soil amendments, fertilizer, on and on and on, all of those different impacts is valuable using measurements. So we've seen meaningful variations in almond ET, for example, based on based on age, based on the density of planting, based on orientation, and as well as management practices.
Okay, well, I've taken more time than I wanted to, but I appreciate it, and I would like to invite you to contact me directly.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to.
Jay can provide you with all my contact information, and I'm inviting you out to McDonald Island so you can get an on-the-ground look at our gigantic pumping stations and see how we irrigate, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I know, and I owe Brett a visit too, so maybe we can combine those.
Okay.
Trips. I can get lunch and dinner out of one road trip.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good with me. We offer burrito lunches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, George. That may actually be a good place to turn to TNC and I apologize, folks. Again, we've kind of run a bit long, but really, Forrest, that was a great presentation, and thanks for kind of bringing us up to speed in your portfolio. And it is pretty amazing the work that you all are doing at OpenET. So thank you for everything you're doing here. And I see Kirk, you're there. Why don't you go ahead and jump and kind of, I think I think we have a lot that we could work on at McDonald and Staten Island together with George there too. And we're pretty excited about the work that you're doing and thinking about the alignment or of coefficient methodology to think about power usage in your tailwater pumping operation. So why don't you go ahead and take it forward from there, Kirk?
Great. Thanks, Jay. Thanks for the other presenters as well. Interesting discussion and data points coming in. So I'm just going to give you a progress update. The good news is that I was able to use AI more than just generating, great videos like quality cinema like this one. But AI is pretty good at analyzing data too. So I kind of feel like this baby, like a ninja when I'm using the AI tools, and I can do anything. I can float in the air and kick and everything. I'll just jump in real quick. So overarching question, some of these great questions are what is the water budget? What's the flux of water in and out of these islands? This is Staten Island. We've got 50 siphons all around the outside of the island. The siphons plus the rain plus the seepage in is kind of the water into the island. The water out is, roughly speaking, ET, the tailwater pumps, and any seepage out, especially during the wet seasons. We have a pretty good handle on rain and ET. We wanted to try to fill in this gap on tailwater pumps. So before we get started, we got a pop quiz here. So I'm going to make sure I can see the chat so I can see your answers. How much average do you think our PG&E bills are for the 2 pump stations at Staten? And George, you've got a leg up on this one since you've got your own similar water bills that you're staring at. But you can put it in the chat. You can say it out loud. Any guess is good.
Well, we have 4 pump stations and we spend $1 million a year.
Okay.
Each pump station has approximately 3 to 4 pumps. So 250 grand for
All
one pump
right.
station.
All right. 250 grand.
One
But that's
pump,
the annual,
one
right? That's not
that's
the monthly.
annual.
Yeah.
But that's for one pump station.
Okay. Okay. So that'd be 20K if I'm doing my math right here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I see 40. I see 50, 60. Okay. Here is the answer. 110K. Whoa. Big spenders. Um, our answer for the last 2 years, the average came out to just under 50,000. So yeah, 48,000. George, you were spot on. I think there was a 50K in that. Christina, yeah, okay, so yeah, Christina has done some research on this as well. Also looked at these bills. Uh, yeah, it's high. And then so you over the total for the past 2 years, we got 2 pump stations. We're over $1 million for the 2 pump stations. So right in line with the data that George is supplying. Um, eh, so yeah, this is a big expense for us, as you can imagine. Um, so I went into a little more detail. I got all of the PG&E data at 15-minute intervals for the past 2 years. So that's the price, the cost, and that varies depending on what time of day. But what we really want to know is what's the power usage itself. So this is in kilowatt hours, and so we have 35,000 records for each pump station. We have some new meters out there installed around August 2025. They are being transmitted in real time via WildEye telemetry devices. And there are, so the basic setup is on these, each pump station has 4 outlet pipes going up and over the levee. We've got a flow meter and a pressure transducer on each of those pipes. So that's, and then we are also tracking the pond level at where the sump pumps sort of pull the water out. This is another kind of data point in terms of trying to figure out what's happening in this system. We have about 10,000 records in a 30-minute interval, so 180,000 data points. If our data points get up close to our dollars spent, I think we'll be doing pretty well. But it's not dollars spent is over data points right now. Okay, and so yeah, I have all this data. I threw it into a folder, had a nice chat session with an AI coding agent, and asked it to start doing some analysis for me, pull all the data together. And I will say that this helps a lot with the tedious elements of this. Anyone who's gotten into the real weeds of this data knows that it's challenging, especially when you're talking about what is the time zone that the data is being recorded at. Is it UTC? Does it include daylight savings time or not? What do you do when you switch over from daylight savings and you have a missing hour or you have duplicate data points on the same hour? It's like trivial, but can it shift your data incorrectly? And when you start to align 2 data sets, you need to have a pretty good solid understanding of it. And so these tools are like, hey, I've seen this before. I know what to do. They do a pretty good job. And then you can verify it. You can always verify it. So what I have been looking at so far is the pressure transducer data. The flow meter data, as I presented last time, is pretty bad. It's inconsistent, orders of magnitude off in terms of the volumes. But I'm really focusing on these pressure transducers. If it's less than 2 psi, it's usually the pump is off. If it's greater than 2 psi, the pump is on. So that's my rule of thumb. And with that, I can say which pump was on at what time point, and then how many pumps are running. So in the east pump station, we have 3 pumps that are electrical, 1 pump that's diesel is kind of a backup. And then at the south pump station, we have 4 pumps, all of them electrical. And we have meters on all of them. And so this just, then I can say, okay, let's look at the time series. If either 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 pumps running, how much electrical usage is going on during that time? And here we see a pretty nice pattern where as the number of pumps, as you can expect, the number of pumps increase, we see increased power usage. And there's some variation on this. According to these error bars, I'll zoom in a little bit more on kind of what the raw data look like. So on the left here, this is just for the east pump station. On the left, we have number of pumps running. And then each one of those little blue dots indicates a power reading for a time point with 1, 2, 3, or 0 pumps running. And you can see there's quite a cloud of points that are outside of what you might expect, and then there's a concentration of points where you might expect more pumps, higher power usage. Part of this problem is this idea that the power reading is instantaneous. So let's say the pump clicks on at 1:31, and you're accumulating all the energy up to 2 o'clock, but when you look at the actual instantaneous read, it would be sort of like, it looks like the pump just turned on at 2 o'clock and it wasn't on at 1:30. So there's a little bit of variation kind of in the shoulder when the pumps click on and off, and they click on and off a lot. So I think that's what's generating a lot of this spread around this. But if you kind of squint your eyes and look at the density of the points, that's really more the signal I'm interested in here as to sort of how much power usage per pump. It's a little bit cleaner at the south pump station. It's actually the pump 1 was running basically all the time. There's only 971 data points with 0 pumps running. And then, that we've got quite a lot of data points when all 4 pumps are running. And so there's a little less spread around that. It's more consistent on or off behavior and more consistent power usage per pump. And then just a real quick visualization of what this looks like. So again, power usage is the kind of orangey color here, kind of steps up and down. When a pump is on consistently, you see this nice tidal pattern in the power usage. As the tides go up and down, the head changes for pumping. So the height it has to sort of pump the water changes. So I always like to see these tidal prisms. It makes me confident the data makes sense. And then the number of pumps is the black line. So that's just is the number of pumps on and off. And we see a very high correlation between those two values. So I'm happy with this. The other cool thing AI will do is just like spin up your own dashboard. So I'll just show this real quick. It just can create a kind of an automated interactive dashboard for you. I can zoom in and out and see what the raw data look like. I can turn on the pressure sensor data. I wish I could take credit for building all of this, but this is not me, unfortunately. I feel like I've got a superpower here. You can get these nice interactive visuals up and running pretty quickly. So next steps is to really try to unpack the flow meter data, try to figure out if there are certain time ranges when I'm more confident that the flow was correct, and then translate that into when pump 1 is on, how much flow do we expect, and then convert that to a flow per kilowatt hour metric. But it's going to take a little bit more hand holding of the AI to sort of help me figure out how to do that. So I'm still working on that. And then to close, I've kind of going waffling between these two states of, oh no, AI will take my job as I watch it just churning through this data, and then hey, great, AI will take my job. Like this is great. I can watch more YouTube videos. Um, so I'll leave you with that thought.
Aren't you going to tell us the most important thing, which is how much water you pump back into the system?
I'm not ready to yet, George. Unfortunately, I was close to that, taking just the pump test values. We've got sort of like this, when this pump is running, here's how much it is, how many cubic feet per second. But it's even the pump test values and the measured pump values are quite a bit different. Um, but yeah, I think by next time I'll have the total volume off, at least an estimate with a wide range of error.
Great. I'm holding my breath.
Okay, good. Any other questions? Dan?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Okay, I might have missed this, but is there a reason you're not putting actual metering devices on the pumps? You're doing it through the PG&E bills.
Both.
Both.
Oh, you
Yeah.
got both going? Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was spacing
So,
out there for a second.
oh yeah, no problem. So I've got flow meter data here. This will just refresh in a second. And a little hard to see, but you can see the blue line down here. That's the flow meters itself. And I'm trying to figure out what is a good meter reading and a bad meter reading. And because I've definitely got both. And so I can't just take the average yet.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
We could probably use your AI tutorial for a couple of other folks in the Delta too, Kirk, to pull this together. I mean, this is great. It's really interesting to see what you've got here, and appreciate your optimistic side of the train there too.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's coming for all of us.
Thank you so much, Kirk. It's a great example. I think one of the richest data sets that there is for different aspects of the water balance is when pumps are on. We know that's being collected already. So did you find it easy to get that from the power company?
Uh, Relatively easy, I'd say. So as with anything, you kind of have to log in to the system, and it's managed by conservation farms and ranches. So I have to say, hey, I'm hacking into your system. What's your password? And can you give me the code? And try to quickly get all the data before it logs you out. But they do have a pretty nice download my data feature. I found that if you subscribe for daily updates and then get historical data, it will run a report and give you 2 years of 15-minute data per account, essentially. Um, so then you just go down and download 24 files and then ask the AI to build you one consistent file out of that. So yeah, relatively easy, but it changes regularly. It's like last time I checked, it was different. And there's a lag, like you have to request it and then it comes the next day. And yeah, and that's it takes a little bit of work, but it's doable.
Terrific. Thank you so much for the presentation. It looks like we've got about 5 minutes left. If we're ready to move to the next thing, Russ, we had you on here for any update if you.
Yes. Yeah, thanks, Will. And I really appreciate we're doing the same, very similar. We're just starting on the AI approach on our data, on various aspects of our data. So, Kirk, I could totally understand, there's fun in it, and there's also what are we doing in it? How do you want to do it? But AI certainly makes it a lot easier. I'm going to give 3 quick verbal updates. I'll save a PowerPoint presentation to update it to a later date. First one's on the water balance. We had a lot of discussion on water balance here. We're going to be end of April installing soil moisture various instrumentation on 5 locations on Bolden as part of the water balance. I made a presentation prior that showed the locations and the types of instrumentation from soil probes to areas where we'll measure surface to depth of groundwater, which leads into the seepage discussion. We're also on Bolden. We have 2 pump stations, and one of them we're going to put strap-on meters. And then we already have the PG&E data, which is exactly what Kirk said. You got to get in, password, all that, and it only allows you a certain amount of previous year data. However, on Bolden's west, the bigger pump station on the west levee, we're actually part of the pump station replacement. We're going to add meters in line with the discharge pipe. So we'll be able to start measuring that in the summer, because that's we're slating that from the rec district perspective to start construction in the summer. And that's a setback levy as well as a pump station replacement. So that'll be going fairly quickly here. So that with that, we will be, Tetra Tech's been helping with that, and MBK's been helping with installation of those locations. So we'll see what the first 5 locations are. We've had a couple of field visits to make sure that we coordinate with the farmer and the RD, that we're not stepping on each other's feet and creating a problem for the farmer out here. So that's the report on the water balance. On the correlation study, we do that every water year. We have a correlation study that looks at pumping to fields to open ET to that same field. I just keep it as simple as that. And it correlates in different time intervals. And you can take a look at what those correlations on, whether it's hourly, daily, monthly. As I reported before, they're not really close. However, the further the timestamp is, and we think on an annual basis, maybe it'll get closer, which goes to my third report is on the pumps, the meters that we've installed. We have total of 86 meters installed. So they're all completely 100% installed per the approved from the Delta Water Master, the approved implementation plan. So we've had 2 islands, Bolden and WebTrack, completely metered on all the siphons from last year, and now we just completed installation of meters for Bacon and Holland Track. So now what we're going to do is start grabbing that data to look at it from an annual island perspective, comparing OpenET to the actual meter data, and then compare some aspects of the water balance that we can. And I think it was Carlos and Foster talked about the different ways to measure the instruments in the fields. And so I do want to coordinate with you, Foster, on what we show as locations, and as we move to 5 locations to 10 locations, be better informed where we install the final 5 locations, that we can be educated from the first 5 to know what seems to work the best for the remaining 5 locations. So that's moving forward. I don't think we have much time. I was going to have Kelsey of MBK present on the final meter installation. I think I'll save that till next time as an afterthought.
Yeah, that sounds good, Russ. Thanks. Forrest, you have a question too, so maybe I'll let you get in last word as we're wrapping
Russ,
here.
this is Forrest. Yeah, would love to work with you on those comparisons, and also just make sure pulling the data for the right locations and all that type of stuff. So I'll put let's see, you're driving. I'll get your email off of the meeting invite and reach out to you.
Sounds good. Yeah,
Right.
I really appreciate the work you're doing. I think what you've done is excellent work. Now let's just try to make sure that we get the best analysis out there for everyone to consider.
Sounds good.
Yeah, this is great. Well, this is exactly the kind of collaboration and data sharing that we're hoping to encourage in this call. And I think we're additionally wanting to be a better integrator on our end too. And so, using the brain power that, is on approaching these questions from different angles is really important for us. And I think we're going to be talking with a number of you in the weeks and months ahead about a focused approach to really better integrate data sets on individual islands, and then how we make that data more comparable in different places, and just putting those values together in a way that I think gives an additional level of coherence to all of the great work that partners on this call are doing. So, and apologies also to UCANR and I think and Jazz on we can kind of work some of the individual updates in more comprehensively, I think, in our next presentation as well. But just want to thank everybody for your continued efforts, and I think the more transparent we can be in exchanging data, and again, Forrest, just appreciate all the time and investment that OpenET is making in the Delta region and helping us kind of think about how we can make the consumptive use data as understandable and useful, and thinking about kind of daily time steps on in diversion and predictable diversion relative to consumptive use or ET data. So all this is really helpful. Appreciate everyone's continued efforts in the DMEC here. And one of the things I also want to just ask for is, if it's possible, Forrest, I'm not sure whether, I think we've lost Carlos, but if you could provide your PowerPoints to us in a data accessible format, meeting the ADA requirements, that would be great. And so Amy will probably be reaching out to all of you for that as well. And I meant to kind of ask for that in advance, but if it helps us post that, unless it is ADA compliant, we can't post it on our website. And we're actually in the process of kind of bringing our DMEC web materials more up to date, and have that ADA compliance issue that we've got to deal with on our end. So just want to flag that for folks. But if you could also send us your presentations today, we have had a number of requests in email, text, and chat to get those out to everybody. So would appreciate that. And we'll try to allow more time for questions and back and forth also at our next meeting, June 25th. So June 25th, 1 to 3 p.m. Hope we can see all of you again here. And again, thanks for all your efforts in bringing these projects forward. And I think it's just, it's really encouraging to me to see the continuing level of interest and depth of study that folks are continuing to put forward in all of this. So thank you all.
Thanks.
Yeah, happy to share my slides, Jay. I don't have descriptions of every figure, so I don't know if they'll meet the ADA requirements, but happy to share. Oh, we lost Russ. Can you give me a hint as to Russ's email address? I realize I want his name and
Sure, I'll send that to you right now.
Appreciate it. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks all.
Okay. Thanks everybody.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.